Yeah, at the outside, let me welcome each and every one. As you all know, that Bibliophiles has been started in the year 2021 in the month of July. In a series of lectures, we have been organized. In the month of July, it was the first of its kind. The very famous author Gopal Krishna Gandhi's book called Restless as Mercury by Sujit Kumar Pruseth. He has reviewed the first of its kind. Secondly, in the month of August, a very interesting book, John Lang, by Amit Ranjan, and also joining by in the programs in the discussions joined by Professor Priti Acharya. The author of the books has also joined Amit Ranjan. Third event took place in the month of September. The book of the event was The Loss of Hindustan by Professor Manan Ahmad Asif from Columbia University. It was reviewed by Dr. A. Gangadharan from Banaras Hindu Universities. Again, in the month of this month, October, the last event it was held by Bibliophiles. The book called Death Must Die, based on the diary of Atmanand. It was reviewed by Professor Brinda Paranjape from Banaras University, and the author of the books, Ram Alexander, has also joined himself. So, what is the most peculiar thing of this particular event is, in most of the event we found, and we are very privileged that we found the author itself. So this is what actually peculiarity of this book. We tried in the case of Gopal Krishna Gandhi to bring him for this particular forum. Maybe in the next event we'll try to receive him as a guest. So this is what the peculiarity, and in that particular series, today's event, the book Galib, A Wilderness of My Doorsteps, that is going to be reviewed by Dr. Narendra Pradhan and Dr. Sujit Pruseth subsequently. And also, we are very privileged and honored that Professor Opsans Farooqi has joined from University of Virginia. So, without wasting much time, let me uh, call to Dr. Dipankar Biswas to introduce our guest for today's event. Thank you. Over to you, Dipankar Biswas.
Thank you, Servicer sir. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Dr. Dipankar Bishwas. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce our guest today, who is going to talk to us about her book Galib, A Wilderness at My Doorstep, a critical biography. This is a subject which we should all be deeply interested because in the 19th century, Indian poet Mirza Ghalib always evoked strong opinions about his literary ode. An early 20th century critic proclaimed India has just two scriptures or divine gospels, the Holy Vedas and the poetry of Ghalib. Our speaker grew up in Allahabad, India, a multiple gold medalist from Allahabad University. She is currently Associate Professor of Urdu and South Asian Literature at the University of Virginia. Her research publications addresses complex issues of Urdu literary culture, particularly in the context of modernity. She is interested in bilingualism and how it impacts creativity. A well known translator, anthologist, and columnist, she is the editor of the pioneering two-volume work of Oxford India Anthology of Modern Urdu Literature. More recently, she has published the acclaimed monograph, The Post-Colonial Mind, Urdu Culture, Islam, and Modernity in Muhammad Hassan Askari. She also writes a featured column on Urdu literature of the past and present in the dawn. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our guest today, Meher Afsan Farooqi. Madam, please.
Yeah,
Thank you
Farooqi
so
ma'am,
much.
please welcome.
Thank you so much for this warm introduction. I'm very happy to be here with all of you, and I'm looking forward to this discussion on my book. So I'm not really sure about your program. I mean, how do you conduct it? Does somebody talk about the book first and then there are question and answers, or you want me to talk about the book? Could you just tell me, just help me through?
Yes, Professor Farooqi, actually, we just invite the author to give their remarks about the broad outlook of the books. Then we invite the discussion to discuss in an much possible and broader way from their
Okay.
perspective. And
Okay.
again, after that, the questions answer as well as authors given their remarks as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So let me begin by describing how I got to write this book. Basically, I'm a modernist, and my work was, as you noticed, mostly about modern literature and modern Urdu literature in particular. So I had no plans of writing a book on Ghalib, although I did appreciate Ghalib a lot. But there was an occasion when a famous scholar on Ghalib, her name is Frances Pritchett, she was retiring, and there was a conference in her retirement to felicitate her, and I was invited to give a paper. So I obviously had to write a paper on Ghalib, and I wondered, there's so much work has been done on Ghalib. There's so many books. So I wondered what I should write about Ghalib that will be something different, something original. So I remembered as a child, my father, Shamsur Rahman Farooqi, is a very well-known. He's no more, but he is a very well-known literary critic, fiction writer, and poet. So he had introduced me when I was a child to a ghazal by Ghalib, and he told me that this is from Ghalib's Mustarat Kalam, which means that is from a collection that Ghalib did not publish, did not include. So I got this. I remembered this from so long ago, and I thought this is a good time for me to write something on Ghalib's Mustarat Kalam. That means his rejected verses. And I thought, there would be maybe 10 or 20 ghazals, and I'll be able to write on about it very quickly. But when I began my research, I was truly surprised to find that Ghalib had rejected more than half of his poetry, of his Urdu poetry in particular. So this came as a big shock to me, and I began to wonder. Of course, I wrote that paper and presented it at that conference, and it was very well received, and people got interested in the topic, and I received very good questions from the audience. But then I decided that, and people encouraged me to go ahead and work on it. So I decided to start my research on the rejected verses, basically. And I spent like maybe first 6 years of my research just uh, finding different divans of Ghalib, manuscripts in which Ghalib, which were before he published his divan. So he first published his divan in 1841. But before 1841, he had, there were so many handwritten manuscripts. And I think it's starting. Should I stop?
Please carry on, ma'am.
Okay. So there were so many other manuscripts, and the most important one was the 1821 manuscript. And this was found in Bhopal in 1919. And it contained a lot of ghazals that no one had ever read before because Ghalib had not published them. So that was a big discovery for me. And I also learned very quickly that that manuscript was missing from Bhopal and it had disappeared at the time of partition in 1947. So I was disappointed about that, but I went ahead and I started collecting more manuscripts and thinking about these questions. And then one day I got an email from someone and he said that he has the 1821 manuscript. And I was truly shocked and taken aback because I didn't expect that, somebody actually could have that manuscript, which had been missing for 70 years. But actually, that manuscript had surfaced somewhere in England and an art dealer was selling it. And this gentleman had wanted to buy it. And he brought it to me in Charlottesville. He brought it actually to my to my I still can't believe that I held that manuscript in my hand and touched all the pages, and it was truly a inspiration for me to continue my work. So as the work progressed, I began to start having lots of doubts about many things about Ghalib that we know. And one of the things that I discovered so late in my career, I would say, is that Ghalib's Persian poetry is 5 times more than his Urdu poetry. This is something that hardly anyone talks about because, of course, Ghalib's fame rests on his Urdu poetry. So there are two things here. A, that Ghalib discarded more than half of his Urdu poetry, and B, that Ghalib had composed 5 times as much in Farsi. And C, he did not discard his Farsi verses. So when he published his Farsi Diwan, first in 1847 and then again in 1865, in 1865, the Farsi Diwan has 10,000 verses, whereas the Urdu Diwan has less than 2,000. So these are things that were there for anyone to pick up, but no one had picked up on these things. And I was very fortunate to be able to be the first person to introduce these ideas into the public domain. Another thing that I discovered was that, excuse me, there was this big question of Ghalib and maybe other forward-thinking writers like him. And actually, he was the first Urdu poet to publish his own work. So the role of the printing industry, the print culture, also was something that people had not worked about, at least as far as Ghalib was concerned. Although there have been people who have worked on print culture, mostly on newspapers and the impact of print. So obviously, the question was that did Ghalib's decision to publish in 1841 have something to do with his popularity as a poet? Because all of us know that Ghalib is a very difficult poet. He has a reputation for being difficult. He himself has said that people have asked me to compose more simple verses, but I really can't do it because it's my nature. Goyam mushkil vagar na goyam mushkil. If I don't write difficult or complex verses, it's difficult for me. And if I do that, it's again difficult. It's complex. These were some of the, as I said, these things started to surface and I had to answer these questions. So what happened was that instead of writing a book on Ghalib's rejected verses, I started writing another book, which was more about Ghalib's bilingualism in poetry, how he had 2 different divans, one in Urdu and one in Persian, and how the Persian divan was 5 times more than the Urdu divan, and how he became famous in Urdu, not in Farsi. So then the question was, why was he rejected by the Farsi readers? And Ghalib's first biographer, and he's the well-known poet and writer Hali, and Hali, by the way, means modern, and he had taken, Altaf Hussain was his name, and he had taken on this nom de plume of Hali, which means I'm modern. So he was the first person who wrote a biography of Ghalib, and it's called Yadgar-e Ghalib, that means a memorial to Ghalib. And Hali was a much younger contemporary of Ghalib. He had actually met Ghalib in his later years and had discussions with him. So Hali's Yadgar-e Ghalib provides us with many clues, but not really the answers to which I was seeking. Anyway, I read Yadgar-e Ghalib very carefully, multiple times, and I found that Hali was very concerned about Ghalib's penchant for writing in Farsi. And he said, I don't understand why he's writing in this language which no one is now really learning or reading much. And this is really, I'm concerned because after some years, nobody will be reading his Farsi, and those things will not be in the public domain. And so he spent like half of this book. Yadgar-e Ghalib is actually a selection and explanation of Ghalib's Persian verses. And indeed, Hali was right, because most people don't know that Ghalib had written so much in Persian and nobody's really interested. But the question that I was trying to answer was that why did Ghalib want to write in Farsi? Because he began as an Urdu poet, and for the first 20 years of his life, he only wrote in Urdu. And then he made this trip to Calcutta for his pension. And after when he reached Calcutta, he found that there was more happening in Farsi over there. Obviously, it was Bengal and it was the capital of the British Empire at that time. And it was more multicultural than Delhi was in those days. So he attended some mushairas in Farsi, and he met many people from Central Asia and other places. And suddenly, I think it dawned on him that if he wrote in Farsi, he would be known beyond the borders of South Asia. That means people beyond India's border would also read his poetry, and he would become known. So from then on, he switched to writing in Farsi, and for the next 20 years, he just continued to compose ghazals and masnavis and, qasidas, all in Farsi. Then he of course, he came back from Calcutta, and another thing that he learned in Calcutta was the importance of the printing press. And he saw that there were all these bookshops there, and books were being sold. And this is also something unique, because it shows us that the book has now become a commodity. The book is now something that you can possess. So the writing is not just the possession of the author. It's not just mine. If my book Ghalib is available for everyone to buy and read, then it is actually a commodity. So Ghalib actually, because he was so forward-looking and he was so he had a sharp mind, he decided to publish his work. And at that time, he thought that, I have this reputation of being a very difficult poet, and, it's one thing to present my work to a small circle of elites, educated elites, but it's another thing if there'll be so many copies and people can buy it, and who knows what will be the reading public. So he therefore decided that he should make a selection. And in this process of selection, he was he was a very severe critic of his own work. And he, as I've said earlier, he cut it short. So what we have in 1841 is a very small, slender divan. It was published from Delhi by Sir Syed Ahmed's Brothers Press, and it probably sold all the copies. We don't know, but we guess that there were 250 copies made, and it was sold out, because another edition was brought out in 1847, and then of course 3 more editions were brought out. So this shows that there was something magical that was happening, that poets' work could be bought in the form of a book, and you could display it in your drawing room and have it there for others to see. This again raises the question of literacy. Who were the people who were reading? And also it raises another important question of orality versus literacy, because we know, as all of you must know, that our culture is mostly an oral culture, or used to be, which is something really, really brilliant. And poetry was always recited in public platforms. Poetry was not something that you sat in a corner and started reading to yourself. It was recited in public platforms, and there was mushaira. And now still we have continued that tradition. We still have some melans, we still have poetry recitations. So my question then was, which of course I was asking myself, who were the readers of Ghalib? Who were the people who were buying the books and who were reading them actually, instead of going to a mushaira and listening to him? And I realized that, it doesn't necessarily follow that everyone should be reading the book. There could be one person with the book and he could be reading out the book to a group of people, just as newspapers were read, just as letters were read. Remember, I mean, in the villages, when people didn't know how to read and write, the postman would read out the letters. So similarly, I realized that there must be a culture where one book was probably consumed by more than one person, because that person was reading out from the book. And this was a tradition all across the world. I mean, in the West also there was this culture of reading to one another, because in those days forms of entertainment were more specialized than they are now. So after I had actually some reasonable answers to my questions, I decided to write this book, second book, I would say. At this point, I was almost done with the book. And at a very late stage, it occurred to me that, Ghalib wrote forewords or dibachas to his Persian divan and to all of his divans, actually, in his Urdu divan also. And these prose pieces are in Persian. And they are very difficult to read and understand, because he wrote in a very highly literate kind of Persian, which needs a very special training to understand completely. So I spent 2 years getting help and reading with my father and with other specialists of Indo-Persian, because you need to have training in the classical Indo-Persian style to be able to read this. And then, so after I read those things, I realized that Ghalib is telling us a lot about poetry. He's actually giving us a critical lens with which to view poetry, and so I included that in my book.
এটা স্যার প্রেজেন্ট কোশ্চেন দেখ এটা আমি বলেছি কেন আমি বলেছি এটা প্রেজেন্ট কোশ্চেন
Okay, so that's how I wrote the last two chapters of the book, and I guess the book was. I didn't think that the book was going to become so popular. Actually, that took me by surprise. Although I know I should have known that Ghalib is such a cherished poet, and he has been read ever since he began to write, So from the 19th century to the present day, I don't think Ghalib has ever been forgotten by anyone, and I should have remembered that. But still, it was a very, very pleasant surprise to find that the book was so well received, and I have given so many talks around the book. And excuse me, the first book that I was going to write, I'm now writing that book, which is about the rejected verses of Ghalib. And hopefully sometime in 2022, next year, I think by the end of next year, the second book will be out. So I guess I have spoken a lot. If you have, I want to open the floor to comments and later on questions. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Professor Farooqi, for these wonderful remarks about the background of the book. Over to you, Dipankar Biswas, sir.
Thank you, sir. Now we will go for the discussion session. Our chief speaker, Professor Narendra Pradhan. He is currently working in Kendujhar Government Women's College, Odisha. He is an erudite scholar keenly interested in literature, especially Urdu and Persian. He has been teaching education for last 3 decades. Now I request our chief speaker, Professor Narendra Pradhan, uh, for his discussion.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, my sincere greetings and namaste to one and all present uh, in this August gathering, online gathering rather. At the outset, let me make it very clear that I am not a proficient, I'm not a scholar in its true sense, may it be Urdu or may it be Persian, as it has been introduced, so I may be excused. I'm interested in Urdu, and I have known Ghalib, or I have read Ghalib through the medium of rather Devanagari script, because I am not well versed in Urdu script or Persian script, so I may kindly be excused for that. I have got that limitation, but I dared to discuss the book here due to one reason, because I got inspiration from Ghalib himself. Because Ghalib, in one of his shares, he says that Jof mein tanae agayar ka shikwa kya hai? Jof mein tanae agayar ka shikwa kya hai? That means, why should a weak person complain on the humiliating comments of his enemy? So here, I am weak in Urdu or weak in Persian. So if I dare to express my opinion, express my admiration on Ghalib's work, and particularly on Meher Afsan Farooqi madam's very scholarly book, A Wilderness at My Doorstep. So here nobody is an Agyar. Agyar means enemy. Everybody is a yar here, rather, I can say. So we are friends here. So if I fail in doing my duty sincerely, then I don't have any regret, because I am not that much an expert in Urdu literature. So anyway, the book, first of all, let me tell you something about the book itself, because I liked it very much. The book is published by Penguin Random House India. Very nice design, very nice paper quality and everything, very nice get-up. Contains 340 pages. But the timeline, I liked one of the most important thing. Farooqi ji has given a very interesting timeline on the life and activities of Mirza Ghalib in the first 38 pages. But in the remaining chapters, the first chapter, The Kite Rises in the Air, I think whatever I have read, एक दिन दिल मिसले पतंग ए कागजी लेके दिल सर रिश्ता ए आजादगी खुद ब खुद हमसे कनियाने लगा इस कदर बिगड़ा कि सर खाने लगा. I think from this particular verse, the title has been taken, the title of the first chapter has been taken. Then in the second chapter, Farooqi ji has discussed the Diwan of 1821 and 1826. Particularly, she has thrown light, she has done a very great job in tracing out the lost manuscripts or about to be lost manuscripts from different sources. And from that, we can say that Ghalib, from the second chapter, I got astonished that a poet or a creator or an artist himself is discarding some of his own writings. That implies that how much a perfectionist Ghalib was in his writing. Then in the third chapter, the Diwan of 1816, which was recovered in 1969. So here, the Diwan of 1816, particularly I am astonished why Farooqi ji has not mentioned the Diwan of 1816 or the manuscript Diwan of 1816, which was recovered in rather than putting it in ahead of this chapter. That means she has not maintained rather there must be a reason, and we shall listen from her why the Diwan of 1816 was put on a later chapter rather than putting it ahead of the Diwan of 1821 and 1826. Then the fourth chapter, it is contrary winds, Bade Mukhalif जिसे कहते हैं, contrary winds and his difficult journey to Calcutta. And it has taken, at that time, no communication, no means of communication, no safety, no road. And for his pension, to claim his pension and to put forward his representation to the British East India Company, he has journeyed from Delhi to Calcutta via Banda. And this chapter I found to be most interesting because here the cultural and literary atmosphere of Calcutta has been very beautifully described in this book, Ghalib A Wilderness at My Doorstep. And next chapter is on Gul A Rana. Here, in this chapter, the author has thrown light on the style of editing or the different editors, how the Gul A Rana has been edited by different editors at different times. She has mentioned Abidi, Malik Ram, and Kudrat Naqvi, and particularly the next chapter, the culture of book publishing and the Diwan of 1841. From this chapter, we get an insight into the printing, publishing, editing, and reading practices which were prevalent in the Calcutta Literary Society at that time. And here, Ghalib was introduced to a larger world of publishing at Calcutta. And just because Ghalib was forward-looking, progressive in his attitude, that's why he might have tried to grab the opportunity of publishing all his work, as ma'am had already mentioned in her discussion. Ghalib grabbed that opportunity, and then in the next chapter, that is seventh chapter, prefacing the poetry, Ghalib's self-presentation. So in the next chapter, how the Dibachas were written, that is forward. Dibacha is forward. Then next chapter is trans-regional sensibility, the case of Ghalib's Persian. And last one, ninth chapter, is the return to Urdu. So here in this book, some manuscripts were recovered, as we are told, from some Kawadis. So there is a coincidence that I was also introduced to Ghalib through a book which I have collected, which I have rather purchased from a Kawadi at Cuttack. And the book, Diwan-e-Ghalib, I would like to show it to this august house. It was a very old edition, Diwan-e-Ghalib. It is in Devanagari script. I don't know whether the letters are properly displayed or not. But however, and the price of the book at that time was 1 rupee, and I got the book Diwan-e-Ghalib at half of its price, that is 50 paise. And I don't regret purchasing that book at that time, Diwan-e-Ghalib. And with 50 paise, I discovered a gem. And My mother tongue is Odia. I read Hindi, I read English, and also through Devanagari script, I read whatever Urdu literature I find. I also read rather your in your Kavita Kosh, different which is an online repository of poetry. So when I expressed my interest before my friend Kishore Meher, he asked me to go ahead to read the book of Farooqi on Ghalib, and uh, for this I
Show it
express my
properly,
heartfelt
sir.
thanks. Yes,
Excuse me, show it properly so
yes,
that we can
ye-
take a picture of that.
yes, yes, yes,
Both,
yes.
both the books, the old one as well as new one, so that it will
Okay,
be.
okay, okay, okay. Thank you. I'm showing the uh, book by Farooqi at present, so it is visible. It is visible
Yeah, yeah,
now.
it is. Yeah, visible, visible.
It is visible now. So the book the back page. This is
Yeah.
the book I purchased at Cuttack. It is also it has been edited by one Rahavar, Hansraj Rahavar, by Hind Packet Books, Diwan-e Ghalib. This has been edited by one Hansraj Rahavar, and as it is a torn and the cover pages are torn, so I cannot ascertain the exact year of its publication, but here it contains almost a majority of the shades, ghazals, किताज कहते हैं या कता कहते हैं. फारूकी मैडम प्लीज enlighten me.
Qita.
Kata,
Qita.
whether kita,
It's Qita.
it's kita, but here it is written in Hindi. It is kata.
No, Qita. Qita.
Qita. Okay, thank you, man. Thank you. So almost all his famous ghazals, they are here. Then his shades are there. So I enjoyed it thoroughly, although I could not follow all the Persian words which have been used here in this edition. So I got it bound, and I preserve it as a treasure with me. And the incident is in the year 1990. So since then, the book is there with me, and whenever I feel melancholic, whenever I experience any type of depression, I read Ghalib, and for the pleasure of it, I am here, not for the scholarly things, not for all those things, because I love Ghalib. I love all the Urdu poets, particularly Mir Taqi Mir, then your others also. And here, I would have been a little bit happy if Farooqi ji had mentioned something more about the literary rivalry between Ibrahim Jouk and Ghalib, because common people like me, they enjoy the literary rivalry very thoroughly, because that type of rivalry, it makes them more productive, more creative, and as a result, we as common readers, we get masterpieces. So that is why the rivalry between Ibrahim Jouk and Ghalib, particularly I love that line. I am not able to recall that line.
हर एक बात पे कहते हो तुम कि तू क्या है.
तू क्या है?
तुम ही
नहीं
कहो अंदाज से. इसका
हाँ.
लास्ट शेर है. बना है शेर का मुजाहिर.
लास्ट शेर है. और जोक के साथ उनका जो राइवलरी था, उसके लिए हाँ, अब बने हैं शाह के मुसाहिब, फिरे हैं इतराता. बने हैं शाह के मुसाहिब, फिरे हैं इतराता, वगरना शहर में गालिब की आबरू क्या है. That means as a comment, it started as a comment to Ibrahim Jouk, because Ibrahim Jouk was very close to Bahadur Shah Zafar. So in his arrogance, there might have been some encounter between Ibrahim Jouk and Ghalib. uh, which might have dissatisfied Ghalib. So when Ghalib had written that line, "Bane hai sahibe musahib, fire hai itrata, bagarna," and subsequently when the complaint reaches the Darbar of Bahadur Shah Jafar, what happens? Faruqi ji can throw better light on that. And such type of some interesting anecdotes could have been added so that no doubt the book is a very scholarly book, but it would have had better appealed common people like me. And before concluding, I would like to, I have already asked one question, madam. Why the manuscript of 1816
Okay.
was included in the subsequent chapter? And first, you discussed the 1821 and 1826 manuscripts. And one more thing I discovered, हजारों ख्वाहिशें ऐसी कि हर ख्वाहिश पे दम निकले, एंड बहुत निकले मेरे अरमान फिर भी कम निकले. Here, one line is there about the authenticity of that line, because people at subsequent time, they also add, make addition to the writings of great poets. So here one line is there in that हजारों ख्वाहिशें ऐसी हर ख्वाहिश पे दम निकले. So here, yes, खुदा के वास्ते काबे ना पर्दा पर्दा ना काबे का उठा गालिब,
कहीं ऐसा ना हो वहाँ
काफिर सनम निकले. So here in my book, madam, here in this book, it is खुदा के वास्ते पर्दा ना, खुदा के वास्ते गालिब पर्दा ना काबे का उठा. लेकिन here it has been खुदा के वास्ते जालिम word it has been used rather than galib. Zalim word is there. So my second question is on that, whether about the authenticity, your opinion, your findings on authenticity, that I would like to know. And one more thing, while Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, he had written Ain-e-Akbari, edited rather. He had edited Ain-e-Akbari and tried to publish it and displayed it to Ghalib. So Ghalib's reaction was on the negative, because Ghalib gave a very favorable opinion towards the Ain, or the particular the rules and regulations of the Britishers. The Ghalib wanted to be progressive. So on these three queries, if you put forward your views, then I'll be honored. And it is an honor to get an opportunity to listen to you, madam, to read you. It is my pleasure. And I am thankful to all the friends who are present here, particularly Kishore Meher ji, who has given me this opportunity, Sarveshwar ji, then after me, Sujit Prused ji, Swadhin sir, and Pritish bhai, everybody who are present here. So with these three queries, ma'am, very humble query, I would like to conclude, and that much I have to present. So thank you. Over to Sarveshwar.
Thank you, Dr. Pradhan, for these wonderful remarks and your love for this 19th century poet and the great Ghalib. And ma'am has done a remarkable job, as I have gone through many reviews over the few reviews. It was wonderfully reviewed about that, and we are also very much happy. So that is the cause that we bring to the soil of Odisha to the book, and also from there we are sparking to globally. And ma'am has been rightly pointed out, and she has been present well. So I am requesting ma'am to please respond to the three important queries of our guest Narendra Pradhan has spoken. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Pradhan ji, Dr. Pradhan, Narendra Pradhan, and Dr. Sarveshwar Pradhan. And first of all, I want to thank Kishore Meher ji for inviting me to this forum. He's my follower on Twitter, And I was delighted when he asked me to join this forum. So I have actually, I have a question. What does Meher mean in Uriya? Why do you have this last name? Kishorji? Meher means,
Yeah, that is also, that is also a puzzle to me. In fact, there is no as such the meaning of the particular word Beher in Odia literature. It is
I
also
see.
not even a Sanskrit word, but I have tried to find out from the Persian words. So in Persian word, there is a meaning of the word Meher with compassion, the man with compassion and
Yes,
all that.
it means compassion. It
So
also
this
means
was
sun. Suraj.
yeah. So sir. Okay.
Yeah, so
Thank you,
I
ma'am.
was okay.
You are very kind of. Okay.
And I want to thank everyone here for joining.
Sorry to interrupt. It's equivalent. In Odia will be Vinita.
Meher means Vinita.
Please correct me, my Odia friends. Sorry. It will not be Vinita. Something. I just made a guess. Sorry.
Okay, to get back to the question. So your first question was why I put the 1816 in the third chapter. I think it's echoing again. Okay, it stopped. So the reason is that I was actually following a reception history of Ghalib. You know, how was his poetry being received? That is why I put the 1821 first, because 1821 was discovered in 1918 and 1816 Diwan was discovered in 1969. So I wanted my readers to know that the biggest discovery was the 1821, because once the 1821 Diwan was found, then only people realized that Ghalib had rejected so many verses, because the 1821 is considered to be the most comprehensive of his early Diwans. And it brought about a huge discussion when it was discovered, because many people felt that why should we publish those poems of Ghalib which Ghalib had rejected? You know, why should we publish the 1821 Diwan? After all, Ghalib had already made the decision that those poems should not be included. So there was a huge discussion that went on, and ultimately it was published, but not as an independent divan. It was merged with his current divan. And so there was also a huge, I think I discuss it in my book, that it created some confusion, because it was merged, and it kind of took away the importance or the sanctity of the 1821 divan. And then later on, it has been published separately as in 1969. So the year 1969 is very, very important for all Ghalib lovers, because it is the first death centenary of Ghalib. Ghalib died in 1869. So 1969 is 100 years since Ghalib's passing. And this was celebrated in the form of conferences, publications all across the world. I think I have referenced this in my book also, that it was a huge, so many magazines took out special Ghalib numbers. And it was in one of these special Ghalib numbers that the 1816 Diwan was also published. So 1969 has a very important history, landmark in the history of Ghalib. So that is why I put it in the third chapter and not in the second chapter. I hope that answers your question. Now, as far as the Ibrahim Zauq and Ghalib rivalry is concerned, most of these stories are what we say in English are apocryphal. That means they need not be true. They might be just made up stories. And the person who made them up, his name was Muhammad Hassan Azad. And he wrote a very important book called Abe Hayat. And this book was published in the 1800 something, 1880, I think. and it is the first history of Urdu poetry. Before that, there were no histories of Urdu or Persian poetry because we don't consider poetry to be a linear development, right? We don't consider that it moves in a straight line because our concept of time is circular. It comes from the Indian tradition that time is circular. So, any poem that was written in 1300 something 70 or it is written in 1920, it still is relevant. But because of the British influence, because of the influence of Western literature, uh, literature was divided into periods. So that's what Muhammad Hussain Azad did. He wrote this poem, he wrote this history called Ab-e Hayat, that means the water of life. And he was a very big admirer of Zauq, Ibrahim Zauq. So when in 1857 his father used to publish a newspaper, Azad's father, and he was executed by the British. After the 1857 rebellion was put down by the British, they killed a lot of people, they executed a lot of people, and his father was one of them. And Azad escaped, carrying with him only the Diwan of Zauq, because Zauq was his ustad. So when he wrote Ab-e Hayat, he privileged Zauq over Ghalib. And he made up a lot of stories that show Zauq in a very positive light and show Ghalib as a very petty person who is complaining all the time about Zauq. The other thing which I discovered during my research was that Zauq was the ustad of Ghalib's father-in-law. So Ghalib's father-in-law was a poet, and Zauq was very young at that time and very poor. So what people did sometimes was that if you had the gift of writing poetry, you could actually sell your poems. You could sell them to people who would buy them for some money and go and recite them in mushairas. And then that poem became theirs. So Zauq was very talented. He was a very talented poet, and he used to give away his poems to people. And in that process, I'm not saying that he composed the poems of Ghalib's father-in-law, but he was very young. Zauq was very young when he was actually correcting the verses of Ghalib's father-in-law. And this reminds me that I think I'm the first person to discuss Ghalib's relationship with his in-laws in this chapter, because I describe some of the ghazals written by Ghalib's father-in-law, and there's a very little information, but whatever it is, we know that they exchanged letters and they did, Ghalib enjoyed in the company of his father-in-law. So that is why I didn't want to include stories that were not proven to be true. But I do agree with you, Pradhanji, that Ghalib had a big chip on his shoulder, as we say in English idiom. That means he felt bitter about certain things, about the way he was treated by his relatives, about the way he was treated by the British government. And so he had a lifestyle that was way beyond his means, and he was always in debt. He was always perpetually in debt, and he was arrested also at one time. He was put in jail for 3 months. He didn't have the money to post the bail. And this was because he felt that all his relatives were very, very wealthy. And his wife, who came from this very wealthy family, did bring a huge, dowry and jewelry and all of that. But his life was in some ways tragic because none of his children lived beyond 2 years. There were 7 children born and all of them died. It was probably due to some biological reason that probably in modern days could have been easily fixed, the rhesus factor. That's my thinking. But so his life was, and then they adopted 2 nephews of his wife, and one of them also died while Ghalib was alive. So he did suffer a lot of grief, and that made him bitter as well. So that's one of the reasons why I didn't go into the Ibrahim Zauq thing. And your third thing about that verse is not Ghalib's, because I have, as you know, I have looked at the original divans, and it is not included in those divans. There were many verses that were added by other people to Ghalib's divans. And one of them was actually one of his editors a very well-known person. His name was Maulana Asi. So he edited the 1821 Diwan, and he added 11 ghazals of his own into the Diwan, and he passed them off as Ghalib because he wanted to test the waters to see if people would recognize it. And many people were fooled. They accepted those ghazals as Ghalib's ghazals. And then later on, he revealed that, oh, these were, I was just playing a prank. And then they were removed. So these are very interesting stories. There are lots of stories. I mean, some of them, of course, are very true because we can verify these things.
Okay. Thank you, madam. Thank you very much. It's so nice of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Hello, Professor Nair Faruqi. Just, I would like to know one thing. I mean, why did Ghalib took the name Ghalib itself? Why he became
good
Ghalib?
question. Good question. Yes. So in his early poetry, he had the name Asad. Asad means lion, and that was also his name, Asadullah. So he was writing as Asad, and later on there were a couple of other Asads, and Ghalib thought that, let me come up with another name. And I think, first he thought that his Farsi poetry will have Ghalib as the nom de plume. But then he felt that Ghalib, which means one who prevails, and it really goes with this personality. Although Asad also as lion goes with this personality, but Ghalib means one who prevails. And so he took on Ghalib as his takhallus, and he actually went back and he changed Asad in many places. If you look at his original divans, you find that the place for the takhallus is left blank, and then he writes in Ghalib later on. And sometimes he scratches out Asad and he writes Ghalib in, and he changes the lines. It's very interesting to follow how he changes the lines, So that keeps happening. Very often I found that he was so particular, as it was mentioned here, that he was a perfectionist. He was very, very particular, and he kept editing his own work over and over again. So that is the story of Asad and Ghalib.
One more query, ma'am. I mean that how far the DD serial Ghalib, Mirza Ghalib's television serial is reliable so far, academic. In terms of academic nature.
This is a very good question. So I think all of you know that there was a film made by Sohrab Modi on Ghalib. It's called Ghalib, I think, right? It was made in the 1950s. And that film, the dialogues were written by Manto, a very well-known Urdu writer. I think everyone knows Manto. That film was actually better than the film. And it made a lot of money. It was a huge success on the box office. And it was with the success of the film that Ghalib's grave was repaired, because Ghalib's grave in Nizamuddin was in a very bad condition. And the money that the film made, they built a marble enclosure around the grave, and they made the grave marble. So the serial Ghalib, actually, parts of it are very okay, good. But the other parts which show Ghalib to be kind of a cantankerous person, or they focus too much on his drinking and on his poverty, are very exaggerated. Because, as I said, Ghalib's wife, Ghalib himself came from a very wealthy family. His father died when he was only 5 years old. And then his uncle, who was also very wealthy, died when he was 9. But his grandparents, his Nana, Nani, and his mother, they were all very wealthy. They were the commanders in the force of the British. And they were from Agra. So they had a lot of money. And his wife, till the end, she had a lot of jewelry, because in 1857, during the rebellion, when things were being looted, what happened was that they buried the jewelry in the ground to save it from from looters. And when they went back later to recover it, it was all gone. So, in the serial, they show her selling her kangans and she's very poor and all of that. So that's a lot of melodrama. Otherwise, I feel that Nasiruddin Shah did a pretty okay job as Ghalib. He's not as handsome as Ghalib was. Ghalib has been described as a very good-looking person, and there's only one good. Yes, he was very good-looking. Nasir is not very good-looking. I'm sorry. Anyway, these are small things. So if you look at Ghalib's photograph, you will notice his hands. His hands are in his lap, and he has the most beautiful artistic fingers, very long and very graceful. And he has been described by his contemporaries as being very handsome, tall, good looking. That's what I have to say about the film and the TV serial. I also want to take this opportunity to ask you all to follow me on Twitter, because I'm often posting Ghalib and Mir and other Urdu verses, but I always translate it so that it is accessible to everyone. And I think that is very important, to make the material accessible, to make it available in Nagari, to make it available in English, Roman, and also to translate it. It's not very easy to translate Ghalib, but I do that as a service to my, my followers, because I feel that translation in some ways actually helps you understand the meaning also. So when a verse is translated, you can understand it better and appreciate it. And it also helps in building the integrity of our cross-cultural, heritage. Because as you mentioned, Dr. Pradhan, Ghalib's Diwan is something that you like to go back to return to it whenever you feel like it. It gives you, it makes you feel like a complete person. It gives you the rasa of literary appreciation. So all those things are there in poetry, and it shouldn't be under the control of one language or under the control of one particular literary tradition. It is meant to be shared. That is what Ghalib wanted. That was Ghalib's wish, that his poetry should be read as widely as possible. So that's one of the things that I'm also trying to do through social media, putting out little pieces of Ghalib in translation so that people can enjoy them.
It's true, madam. Thank you. And it has been rightly said that कहते हैं कि गालिब के अंदाजे बयां हो. His unique style of सुखनवर बहुत अच्छे.
बहुत अच्छे. कहते हैं कि गालिब का है अंदाजे बयां और. And I think I also pick up this share that पूछते हैं वो कि गालिब कौन है, कोई बतलाओ कि हम
बतलाएं क्या.
हाँ, because
thank you, madam. Thank you.
I think everyone knows Ghalib.
Very nice, very nice. Really.
Any more questions for me?
Yeah, Professor Pandya, would you like to have any questions, sir?
Basically, no, because hello, ma'am.
Hi.
Yeah, I'm not a student of literature. I have come to know Ghalib through those, as you mentioned, some movies, and as Dr. Meher mentioned about the DD serial. So I will just recite one or two ghazals.
Sure.
Ghalib, the most famous and most widely that is available in internet and all that.
Sir, you have been muted, sir.
You have muted yourself, sir. Unmute. Please unmute, Dr. Pandya.
यस 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 हाँ हर एक बात पे कहते हो तुम कि तू क्या है, हर एक बात पे कहते हो तुम कि तू क्या है, तुम्हें बता दो कि ये अंदाज़ गुफ्तगू क्या है। रगों में दौड़ते फिरने के हम नहीं कायल, रगों में दौड़ते फिरने के हम नहीं कायल, जब आँख ही से न टपका तो फिर लहू क्या है। चिपक रहा है बदन पर लहू के पैराहन, चिपक रहा है बदन पर लहू के पैराहन, हमारी जेब को अब हाजत रफू क्या है। थैंक यू।
Thank
Thank
you,
you so much.
Dr. Pandya, for this wonderful recitations of this beautiful verse. So, with this note, I would like to uh, introduce our last speaker of the day. That is Dr. Sujit Pruseth. I think there is no, he doesn't require any introductions. He has been contributing to this platform from the early stage. He has been putting his many such remarks and well-to-do suggestions over the time periods also. With this note, he has been an acclaimed author. Very recently, he put much on his thought to uh, Mahatma. So, with this note, I am inviting Dr. Sujit Prusad to remarks his view overall about this book as well as the program and also the concluding remarks of this particular event. Over to you, Dr. Sujit Prusad.
Once again, very good evening and namaskar from India. It's nice to welcome Professor Meher Afsan Faruqi ji for this brilliant deliberations. And I also welcome uh, all distinguished members here, those who are present here for their graceful presence here. And today we are making a presentation on the recent book that I also purchased recently, the book called Galif by Penguin. And it's I must say, it's a treasure to my collection of books. So while I was listening to Professor Faruqi, I was just reminding of some of the quotations by the great poet Galif. हजारों ख्वाहिशें ऐसी हर ख्वाहिशों पे दम निकले, means his relevance in today's world, it has already been underlined by Professor Faruqi's book. So today, when we see the multiculturalism, multilingualism, so the relevance of Ghalib will make us to think about his contributions in a time when there was something called diatrics in linguistics. Diatrics means both Urdu and Persian language. So he kept on writing in Urdu and shifted to Persian. So if you look at the trajectory, it started with Urdu and it ended with Persian. So what the author Faruqi, Professor Faruqi has done, that she has shown excellent command over the original sources, and she has also shown something called a very passionate engagement, which is demonstrated in every single page of the book that I read. It's a very huge book, and if I go into the details of the book about Galif, Galif's presence in the literature, it heralds some new era in the print form of literature. Somewhere around 1830s, the Urdu publishing started. For example, in 1837, the very first newspaper or the publication that started in Delhi, it's called the Delhi Urdu Akhbar. Subsequently, there was 1849, that is called the Saidul Akhbar, and both of them took pain in publishing Galif, Diwan in 1841. So we have seen the journey of this gentleman called Asadullah Khan, born in Agra in 1797, and the lifespan goes up to 1869. It's an era where the language becomes one of the part and parcel of Indian life, Indian civilization. So when we look at the journey of this gentleman called a poet called Galif, we also see the journey of a very committed writer, a very strict editor, and something very crucial to the Indian literature is a very swabhimani, means a person who believes in his own self defined rules and regulation. He never compromised on these things. One example is that in 1840, he refused a position of Persian professor in a Delhi college. And around 1854, he accepted to be the royal ustad. So if you look at to the journey of a poet, it's not a journey, it's a simple poet. He was a man of principle and a very strict editor, and it's very essential for the journey of language also. So far the book is concerned, the author, Professor Farooqui, she has approached the book and she has made the poems of Ghalib, his life, his career, his complex life with both Urdu and Persian in a very multilingual age. That is the relevance of the book. Today we are all living in a multilingual age, and that is the relevance of the book. So the analysis of the book follows the tradition. The methodology is something called literary historical analysis. And all kudos, all appreciation to Professor Farooqui for this brilliant task he has done here. And the book examples, the book reflects the deeply researched examination of Ghalib's literary contributions. So when we look at the Dibachas, means the forewords that was written somewhere around, let's say around 1833, then the another book he wrote, the Panj Ahang, somewhere around 1835 he collected, and it was published in 1849. The second edition was again 1853. And another book that is very crucial in Ghalib's life was Gule Rana in 1828. So if you look at to the contribution of a poet who enriched the both Urdu and Persian writings, and he also enriched the life of a poet in a, let's say, both Lucknow, then Delhi, and these all places. Today, if you look at to the old city of Delhi, you can get the reverberation of a gentleman called a poet in every nook and corner. People, the lifestyle, the way the people behave with others, it's always a literary skill that we reflected in the lifestyle of people. So literature became a part and parcel of common man's life, and that is the biggest contribution of Ghalib also. In today also, that is the same thing. That when you interact with each other, if you quote a poem or if you use the Urdu words in a very brilliant way, it also shows that your rapport with the other person, that is enriched through literature. So the very first task the author has done in this book, and Professor Farooqui must be congratulated, that the both Urdu and Persian has common vocabulary in classical literary register, but different way of pronunciation. Professor Farooqui has adopted the Urdu pronunciation, and she has also followed the hybridization of Urdu, Persian, and Arabic, whereas Ghalib was very heavily Persianized. And she has also very brilliantly wrote and very personal anecdote that she started reading Ghalib when she was only 10 with the instruction from her father. So the acknowledgement itself tells that she was uh, literally engaged to the poet, not in today's world, but when she was a kid also. And we must congratulate her for a very candid confession on this one. So we'll go over to the other contributions of this book. That there are two chapters that we see in the end of the book. Last two chapters, it talks about the two concepts. One is the trans-regional dialogue, and the second is the intertextual dialogue. So we see today that the intertextual dialogue and the trans-regional dialogue, it covers the distance between different region and the different texts. So today when we are in, I think the previous speaker, Professor Pradhan, Professor Sarveshwar and other people, they were talking about something, and the other speaker was also talking about how he purchased a book in Cuttack and these things. It is just bridging the gap between two literature or two languages itself. So the question is right now the relevance of the book itself. It has been proven here that the trans-regional dialogue has already happened that we see in today's platform and the book itself. And the second thing is that intertextual dialogue also. So the last two chapters and this subsequently one of the chapter that I found very important is the chapter 7 that talks about the khatimas. So from Dibachas to the khatimas, the 7th chapter is very, very important. in the contributions that the trans-dialogue, the trans-regional dialogue and the inter-regional, intertextual dialogues are contained in the chapter 7. So basically, when you look at the book in a nutshell, it fills in the gap that the literature barrier between the different language of this country and the Urdu and Persian has been bridged. So it's a very systematic, it's a very research oriented, it's a very scholarly work. So so far the scholarly work goes, the book also scores very high. I must say, Professor is there. The author has divided into 9 chapters, and every single chapter's title is very eye-catching. It touches the heart itself, right from chapter 1 to the last chapter also. And most important thing, there are 3 appendices. It has already shown the scholarly work, and the most important thing that I found here, there are notes, and the note is 57 pages. Every single chapter has got more than, I think, 60 to 70 notes. And in the one chapter, she's talking about the Dibachas, how Dibachas started, how Dibachas relevance is, and what are the meaning of Dibachas. The author has said that she has used it as a foreword only. So Dibachas are a brocade of ornamentation, calligraphy, which Gali was also known for. And if you look at to the entire book, there are the 9 chapters, and the last 57 pages, including the excluding the bibliography, they are the treasure trove for the reader and the subsequent researcher in the days to come. So I must congratulate the author once again. I take the privilege and honor of congratulating the author, Professor Meher Afsan Farooqi, for the brilliant work and the brilliant gift to the new generation. And the ways he has introduced Galif. I have read Guljar Sahab's book on Galif, and I have Pawan Kumar Burma's book also. That's another step in this direction. Professor Farooqi, once again, congratulations, and we also sincerely convey our deep gratitude and sincere thanks for sparing your valuable time and gracing the occasion and addressing us. At the same time, the way you address the different questions, it simply enriches the deliberations. At the same time, it is also an honor to field different questions to you. So we do have many armans, hajaro khwaise. These khwaises are the wishes are many. It's not been satiated. We look forward to more writings from your side. And I must congratulate our second speaker, Professor Narendra Ji, for his brilliant analysis as a reader, as a appreciator of the language, and also his brilliant collection of his Galip's work. The way he analyzed the topic, the way he deliberated on this topic, it gave us a new dimension. It gave us a new perspective, how to look into literature, how to look into a writer's contribution also. So today, it's a very solemn occasion, not only to meet an author, but to interact with her brilliant creations on a book called Galif. And it's a critical biography also. So the book is another milestone in the literature of India, in the English writing, which is also bridging a gap into something called the inter-regional, the intertextual gap. I once again congratulate the author, Professor Farooqi, and also convey my sincere thanks to Dr. Dipankar Biswasji for making an introduction about the author. And I congratulate and convey sincere thanks to Professor Swadhin Patnaikji for being here and gracing the occasion as a audience also. And I convey my sincere thanks and gratitude to Professor Kishore Meher sir for organizing this bibliophile meeting, and Professor Sarveshwar for starting the occasion. Once again, congratulations to, I'm not able to restrict myself in conveying my deep gratitude to the Professor Afsan Farooqi, and look forward to more books from Professor Farooqi. With these words, we come to the conclusion of this brilliant session, very interesting session on Professor Meher Afsan Farooqi's brilliant book, Galif. We'll meet in next month with another edition on some other topic. Till then, goodbye from here, namaskar from here, and we wish you a very healthy and prosperous life in the days to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sujit Prasad sir, for this wonderful concluding remarks. So, the time is already knocking the door. It is 8:30 already. So we are very much stick with the time, and very much sorry for today's delay of 8-minute delay due to some technical glitch from our side. Personally, from my sides as well.